Après-midi. Good afternoon, everybody. Be back together with the entirety of our committee. I hope everybody had a very enjoyable summer. J'espère que vous avez passé un bon été avec votre...
I hope you spent a wonderful summer with your families, your friends, the people who voted for you.
So I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the second meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee of Industry and Technology. Couple of things, a reminder as we're talking about technology, if you're making use of your headset, please ensure that when it's not in your ear, that you've got it on the sticker. This helps to reduce the amount of noise that can be quite detrimental to the health and well-being of our interpreters who work very hard on our behalf. I always like to give them a little wave and a merci, a thank you for the hard work that they do to support us here at the committee. So, colleagues, as you are aware, je pense, comme vous le savez,
I think, as you know, that we had a subcommittee meeting
just a couple of days ago to try to get us to a place whereby we could be very effective and efficient as we start our affairs here at INDU for this session of Parliament. So what I am going to do is just read the report, which everybody should have a copy of, but that just simply summarizes the information that we reported back to everyone. So it reads as follows. Your subcommittee met on Monday, September the 15th, 2025, to consider the business of the committee and agreed to make the following recommendations. One, that the first hour of the meeting on Wednesday, September 17th, that would be right now, be reserved for discussion of the future business of the committee, which we will enter into very shortly. Number two, that for the second hour on Wednesday, September 17th, the committee invite Matthew Boswell, the Commissioner of the Competition, Competition Bureau of Canada, to appear before us to discuss the general mandate and other related matters. That will be the second half of today's meeting. And that on Monday, September 22nd, the committee invite Vicky Atreides, the Chairperson and Chief Executive Officer of the CRTC, to appear before it from 11 to 12. The only caveat here, colleagues, is that we've received word about the availability of the Chairperson of the CRTC, which does not accommodate Monday. I believe, Madam Clerk, we're aiming to have that for Wednesday. So confirmed for Wednesday. So colleagues, depending on the direction we provide for ourselves today, we will use Monday of next week to begin the affairs that I imagine we will establish. And then on Wednesday, we will take an hour out of whatever it is we decide we will be doing in terms of business for the committee to hear from the CRTC Commissioner, and then we will resume whatever it is that we have set forth. J'espère que c'était clair. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions?
I hope that was clear.
The next meeting today and next week. Okay, seeing none, we are moving into committee business. I see hands flying already. Mr. Bardisi.
I believe, but okay.
I was looking at Monsieur Saint-Marie, but we can come to, I think we can come to a conclusion here. So let's start here. Of course, colleagues can speak to this, and then Monsieur Saint-Marie, je ne sais pas si vous avez une préférence, mais...
I don't know if you have a preference, but I think we can ask Ms. Dancho to present her motion first.
Mr. Bardisi, the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've had good discussions at this committee and other discussions later. So I have a motion which was shared with the members of the committee yesterday. And I would like to read it into the record.
Submitted. The motion is as follows, en anglais et en français. That pursuant to Standing Order 18082, given the imperative for Canada's self-reliance in national defence and security and the significant level of investment announced, the committee studied the opportunity to use a defence industrial strategy to regenerate and further develop sovereign capabilities of Canada's industrial ecosystem and procurement opportunities for Canadian businesses. This includes areas such as aerospace, digital technologies, cybersecurity, vehicle and arms manufacturing, heavy industry, scientific research, advanced materials, and the bioeconomy. That the committee invite representatives from the Department of National Defence and the Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development to appear on the study, that the committee hold a minimum of 6 meetings on this study to conclude no later than November the 5th, and that the committee report its findings to the House. Et je le lis en français aussi? Non, c'est bien.
Okay, Monsieur Saint-Marie, vous avez une copie, n'est-ce pas? Excellent. Okay, colleagues, we will always do our best to have motions provided in both official languages where possible in advance. I think we've satisfied that in this instance. Colleagues, just a very quick reminder, because we do have some new members around the table who may not be completely familiar with process, so forgive me if I delve into the former educator in me to explain a little bit, but we are now entering a phase where we've had a motion moved, which means we can have debate on this motion. Once debate ceases, we then move into a situation where either by consent we move forward or into a voting situation. So with that, if anyone would like to speak to the motion, Madame Dancho. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And given it's my first opportunity to speak, I would like to say how honored I am to be on this committee with all of you and to be the vice chair of it, and look forward very much to working with colleagues of all parties, and been encouraged so far by the collaborative discussions that we've had, and hope that that will continue and certainly set the tone for the weeks and months to come. So with that, I'd like to move an amendment to the Liberal motion. And given it's fairly similar, I'll just indicate, just so it's easier, just raise my hand a little bit so folks know where I'm amending it. I just found that's easier in the past. It would read as follows as amended, that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, given the imperative of Canada's self-reliance in national defence and security and the significant level of investment announced, and the committee study the opportunity to use a defence industrial strategy to regenerate and further develop sovereign capabilities of Canada's industrial ecosystem and procurement opportunities for Canada. This includes areas such as aerospace, digital technology, cybersecurity, vehicle and arms manufacturing, heavy industrial industry, scientific research, advanced materials, and bioeconomy. That the committee invite ministers and representatives from the Department of National Defence and the Department of Innovation, Science, Economic Development to appear on the study. That the committee conduct the study concurrently with a study on Canada's outflow of capital investment and productivity decline for a minimum of 6 meetings each, should such a study be undertaken by this committee, and that the committee report its findings to the House. So that is my amendment proposal, or as moved. And Mr. Chair, I would say 2 things. So the first amendment is, of course, to invite ministers to this study. And given that Canada is currently without a defence industrial policy, at least to the magnitude I believe Mr. Bardisi and the Liberals would like to see brought forward, this would be quite a significant advancement in some ways, depending on what the content of the policy is, of defence policy in this country. And I know the minister has been quite vocal about her support or her advocacy for the defence industry in Canada. We've seen that quite a bit on her social media. I would imagine that she would welcome the opportunity to come speak to that and answer important questions. And I would say that without the testimony of the Minister of Industry and the Minister of Defence, that I do feel that the report in the end would be lacking of the content required to bring the prestige I think is needed to a report recommending such a change in industrial defence policy, or to introduce it. And then the second part, certainly, of course, we've had private discussions, and of course, I think everyone is keen, as I said, to work collaboratively, and of course, that means that we have an air of compromise as well. Everybody gives a little, and everybody gets a little. And so I think we've established that a little bit behind the scenes with writing our motions. Everyone seems to have adjusted them a little bit from their original format, which I greatly appreciate, Mr. Chair, and is not always the case on committees. That being said, of course, the issue, I believe, as we know, we have a motion we want to bring forward. I know the Bloc has a motion they'd like to bring forward. So I think the sticking issue, Mr. Chair, would not be our support for this motion, our motion of the Bloc, just the order that we would like to ensure that they are conducted. And of course, Liberals would like theirs first. We would like ours first. So I think a reasonable compromise would be, and I've done this and had success in past committees, that we have the studies, as I've mentioned, the amendment concurrently, that one goes one day, perhaps Monday, and the other goes on Wednesday, and we have equal number of meetings, and so that continues for 6 weeks. And then it's fair, it's a compromise on both sides, and everybody wins a little. So that is my proposal, Mr. Chair, with my amendment, and I look forward to hearing feedback from members. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Madame Dancho. I had a few hands up over here of members that would like to speak. So I had Mr. Guglielmin, followed by Ms. Borelli, followed by Mr. Saint-Marie, followed by Mr. Bardisi. The floor is yours, Mr. Guglielmin.
When did you, excuse me, Mr. Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ted. It was Mr. Falk, Mr. Guglielmin, not Ms. Borelli, followed by Mr. Saint-Marie, followed by Mr. Bardisi. This is not the friendly Manitoba that I try to live up to, Ted. I'm very sorry. Mr. Falk, the floor is yours.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's nice to meet all my committee members. Looking forward to working on industry and to have you as a chair. Mr. Chair, I'm looking forward to that as well. I think we'll work well together. Could I have that motion read out again so we all, or the amendment, so we all know what we're talking about?
So just to be clear, Mr. Falk, you are asking for the amendment as put forward by our colleague, Madame Dancho, to be either read again or
just read again.
read again. Well, Madame Dancho, perhaps I can turn the floor to you as you proposed it and ask that you reread it for the benefit of Mr. Falk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the only changes come following the word bioeconomy, and it inserts that we invite ministers. So that's the first amendment. And the second and last comes just at the end after the word study. It says that the committee conduct this study concurrently with a study on Canada's outflow of capital investment and productivity decline for a minimum of 6 meetings each, should such a study be undertaken by this committee. And of course, as we know, that is the area of discussion we would like to study. Thank you.
Mr. Falk, does that satisfy what you were looking for?
I am, and I just wanted clarity on that. And I think it's excellent. I think we do need the ministers here to give us insight as to where we're at exactly in their respective departments, but also to provide a little further guidance to us as to the direction that they want to see their departments go. And I think that would be helpful for us in our study to help focus the study a little bit better. But I'm wondering, would it also be appropriate at this time to make a sub-amendment?
Well, in terms of whether it's appropriate or not, Mr. Falk, you are allowed to provide a sub-amendment, should you wish. Just for your recollection, as I'm sure you're aware, should you put forward a sub-amendment, we will debate that sub-amendment until we come to an agreement, at which point we would then go back to the amendment and then back to the whole motion.
Correct.
But it is your prerogative to move a sub-amendment should you wish.
Yeah. I would like to add a sub-amendment. I would actually I won't add it. I would really like to include the Minister of Finance here as well so that we can put things into a financial perspective. But I'm going to limit my sub-amendment to clarifying that each of the ministers invited, and I don't have the wording for it, but both the Minister of Industry and the Minister of Defense come to this committee for a period of not less than 2 hours.
So, Mr. Falk, I think for the benefit of the committee, it might be a good opportunity for us to have your staff provide in writing that sub-amendment so that we have it and we can work off of it. I think we've received the general direction you have in mind, but since procedurally we can't move on to any other item until we begin debating that sub-amendment, I'll look around the room. If colleagues feel as though they're ready to begin a conversation on the sub-amendment, we certainly can. But
I just want it to be more specific, Mr. Chair, that we don't just invite them and we give them a 10-minute slot and they're out of here. I want it to be clear that they're each coming for a period of no less than 2 hours.
Yeah, certainly understand that. Okay, well, colleagues, do we feel we need to wait for that in writing, or do we feel like we understand what Mr. Falk is looking to do? Okay, then with that, who wishes to speak to the sub-amendment? I see a hand from Mr. Bardisi, so the floor is yours.
Merci, Député Falk.
Thank you, Mr. Falk.
The sub-amendment. I would just observe that if we have each of those ministers for 2 hours each, and we only have 6 meetings, that means we have 4 meetings for all their witnesses. And I think we all love to hear what ministers have to say on topics of national importance. But I think in a project when we're trying to have the prospect of informing policy, I think the large balance of witness testimony should be from those who can actually inform us, who can then help inform our report and then inform ministers. This is a huge space and a somewhat new space for members of definitely new members of this House. And so I think hearing from as many experts and players in this sector as possible is a bit more important. Mon avis, c'est que nous aimons toujours.
We always are happy to hear from ministers, but with this kind of subject, it's important for us to hear testimony from experts. Thank you, Mr. Bardisi. Mr. Sainte-Marie. Yes, thank you.
Salutations à tous les collègues.
Hello to all of my colleagues. So first of all, the interpreters pointed out that when there are amendments and sub-amendments that are read, if it's possible to provide them with the copy with the translation that is already prepared, it facilitates their work, because often we might be debating this significance of some of the words. Yes, of course, thank you. That's understood. I agree with the motion as moved that reflects the spirit of collaboration of all of the parties in this committee. I also agree with the amendment that was moved, which in my opinion reflects the discussions that we had amongst ourselves at the subcommittee and during the time that it was suspended, so that this study could happen concurrently with the study that will be proposed momentarily. And also the fact that we'd be inviting the ministers concerned to come and present their vision is a principle that I agree with. I also would agree with the sub-amendment in essence. Too often the government and ministers are not overly interested in the committee's work. They come very quickly and they don't come back, except that I think in this case we really need to preserve or keep some kind of balance and good cooperation between all of the parties involved. If there was agreement to invite the ministers for 2 hours, as I heard in the formulation of the sub-amendment, I would support it. But as it is more unusual as procedure, and that we do have to want to maintain this collaboration between the parties, I would be inclined to support that. So, Mr. Sainte-Marie, I'm sorry, but there's a point of order. And as you know, I have to give the opportunity.
Is it your translation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I haven't been getting translation.
Okay, I'm going to suspend for a moment just so we can get that sorted out, okay?
I think no one.
Monsieur Saint-Marie, la parole à vous encore.
Mr. Sainte-Marie, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was saying, in the spirit of cooperation between the parties, I would support the motion as put forward. I support the amendment that was brought, which in my opinion represents or reflects the discussions we had. And if there was unanimity to support the sub-amendment, I would support it. But wanting to support the good agreement that we had and the discussions we had during the subcommittee and that its suspension, I wouldn't support the sub-amendment. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sainte-Marie.
As a new member, are we speaking only on the sub-amendment now or the amendment?
That's correct. So where we're at right now, colleagues, is Mr. Falk has presented a sub-amendment. Discussion will continue on the sub-amendment until we reach a point at which there are no further speakers. We will then vote on the sub-amendment. If it's adopted, we will then resume debate on the amendment as amended. And then once we're done dealing with that, we will go back to a final vote on the motion as amended. So we are currently on the sub-amendment right now. Did you want to speak to it?
Yes.
Okay, floor is yours.
So thank you again, Mr. Chair. And on the sub-amendment, I do agree that we're going to need the ministers here for no less than 2 hours each, just because, given the severity of files like industry and national defense, I think it's important that the people who are in charge of those departments present themselves to this committee for an adequate period of time so we can question them appropriately. Arguably, there's not even enough allotted time in the 2 hours. So we need to take as much opportunity as we get. I mean, this is a committee of transparency, a lot of professionals around the table, and I know we want to proceed constructively. We want to proceed as a group of people who are trying to act in the best interests of this country. So I think collectively we could all agree that the minister should appear for the full duration as introduced by my colleague. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gugelmin. Ms. O'Rourke, the floor is yours. Mr. Falk, on a point of order.
I've sat here reflecting, and I think if we're going to spend a lot of time debating my sub-amendment, I would be just as happy to withdraw it. And
Okay, so in order to...
Let's pass the amendment.
Yeah, in order to withdraw, Mr. Falk, as you may recall, we need unanimous consent.
Correct.
I'm looking around the table. I see it. Sub-amendment withdrawn. We will resume debate on the amendment, and we ended, Mr. Falk, with you. Next on my list was Mr. Gugelmin on the amendment, followed by Monsieur Sainte-Marie on the amendment that was proposed by Madame Dancho. Monsieur Sainte-Marie m'indique ça suffit pour lui.
Mr. Sainte-Marie says that that's okay for him.
Yeah, I'll just sort of articulate again that the Minister of Defence and Industry, they play key roles in shaping Canada's defence and industrial strategy, and their direct participation is essential. And, as I said a few moments ago, we're willing to work in the spirit of collaboration, and I think studying these amendments concurrently is fair to both the Liberals and the Conservatives, because both of us, as my colleague stated, would like to have our amendments or our motions studied first, and this is, probably the most adequate way to do it. And again, I'll say again, we believe that having these ministers appear, it'll strengthen the study, it'll demonstrate a commitment to transparency and meaningful oversight. We're open to cooperating in this process, but the attendance of these ministers must be included.
Okay, Ms. O'Rourke.
Thank you, Chair Carr. I'm delighted to join you all. It's my first time on the Industry Committee, and it's a critical issue for a city like Guelph. A concern that I have around holding the studies concurrently is that the motion lists 7 sectors, right, that we want to explore in order to provide recommendations and a path forward in terms of a industrial strategy. And my concern around having these be concurrent is that we would be looking at 2 very significant studies concurrently, and I would prefer to have clarity in terms of the one study to move our experts from the sector, from the industry forward, so that we have a holistic view in a condensed way. It's my first time in committee, so I'm willing to hear from others around how that works. But if we can have a consistency in terms of what we're studying so that we can arrive well prepared for the folks who are going to speak on these 7 sectors. That's certainly my preference.
Okay. Mr. Bardizzi?
Thanks. And peut-être on peut avoir.
Perhaps we could have a short pause so that we can just discuss briefly amongst my colleagues. But before that, I would just like to indicate that I support Ms. O'Rourke's points. In my opinion, there's an opportunity to inform the people and the government. This affects everyone, and that's the reason why it is a particular situation. Growth is very important, and we can study that now, or we can study it later, in my opinion. It's a new parliament, and I just think that perhaps we could do what the members with more experience than I have suggested. So if there is an opportunity to inform the political public, it's worth it.
You know, I used to run a think tank, and when you were trying to run a bunch of studies at the same time, the people working on this, you never wanted too many people working. You never wanted one person working on more than one study at the same time. And I know that there is some stress in our limited resources here with the Library of Parliament. So I'll just share that remark as well. But I do want to contextualize this finally by just saying I agree with both MPs Dancho and Sainte-Marie that there has been a lot of collaboration, that we've been able to move things generally forward, and this is really just some issues around the edges.
Merci, Monsieur Bardizzi. So the request was from Mr. Bardizzi to briefly suspend. I'm going to grant that. This is our first day here, colleagues. We've got questions from folks about how procedure works. Clearly, there's a little bit more talking that needs to occur. We're at a little bit of a stalemate. So I am going to briefly suspend to provide an opportunity for the parties to discuss. I hope when we come out of suspension that we will have resumed with some type of decision to direct us forward, but we're going to suspend briefly. that there may be a path forward here, so I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Bardisi, if he is prepared and ready, and to let us know what's on his mind. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So we've had a nice conversation, productive conversation. Appreciation for those who are supporting the new members. I guess maybe can I just I guess put a question, and maybe it's to you and to the clerk. Motions that initiate studies, if there is a desire before the study is actually initiated, before a hearing is held, to make further amendments to the terms upon discussion with members, is that something that is required in a committee business portion, or is that something we can move at any time?
Sure, I fully understand the question, Mr. Bardisi.
Okay, sorry.
If you could.
So, we've got three substantive study motions sort of on the table, including an amendment. And, we have awareness that other committees may be doing other work. We don't know the results of those committee deliberations that is similar, and in particular on defense industrial policy, there's a possibility that the Standing Committee on National Defense may be initiating a study. We don't know. Their deliberations are happening as well. And so we have these motions in front of us with studies, with some terms under those studies. But I guess the question is, we can move these motions through, and we've got three motions on which there's a fair degree of alignment among the parties to go ahead, or we can perhaps table until and bring one of them back, say the Defense Industrial Policy study on Monday. And so my question is, or can we just pass these motions through and then consider an amendment to the study motion that we've initiated today, but we haven't actually initiated the study yet?
We don't know what you want to do.
All right.
Hang on.
There's some clarity that's needed here. I'm going to suspend briefly. I
in Canada to the United States, but I know we're limited in time, so we can leave it, I will leave it at that for now. Over to you, Mr. Chair. Okay.
Okay. You'd like to speak to this, Mr. Bardisi?
Just move an amendment.
You'd like to move an amendment?
Yep.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of alignment on this side of the table on this motion. I'd just like to amend the motion to remove the two clauses of the preamble, specifically given that Canada's longstanding weak productivity has been a strain on government finances and affordability, and given the unprecedented outflow of capital investment from Canada. My amendment is to remove those two clauses.
Okay, colleagues, are we clear? Are we able to move forward with discussion on the amendment proposed by Mr. Bardisi without having the language provided to us? Monsieur Saint-Marie, j'apprécie que c'était pas...
Mr. Sainte-Marie, I appreciate that it wasn't moved in French, but you're okay?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so you know, we're running out of time. So in brief, of course, we made every effort to remove partisan language from this, but certainly the facts remain, and it's sometimes difficult to read them, but I am a bit surprised that this amendment is being moved by the Liberals since, as was read, given that Canada's long-standing weak productivity has been a strain on government finances and affordability, is from Prime Minister Carney's mandate letter to ministers. So I am surprised that Liberals are moving to remove Prime Minister Carney's own words from a Conservative motion. I will read them into the record just for clarity. So on May 21st, 2025, the Prime Minister of Canada, Liberal Prime Minister, provided his mandate letter, and it said as follows: at home, our long-standing weak productivity is straining government finances, making life less affordable for Canadian families, and threatening to undermine the sustainability of vital social programs on which Canadians rely. So that is, again, the Liberal Prime Minister's words to his cabinet, which Conservatives have used in our Conservative motion. And now we have a situation where Liberals are not wanting to read that, I guess, not wanting it on the record, not wanting it in our motion, or to really even set the stage for an important study in industry, despite the Liberal Prime Minister explaining and setting the tone for Cabinet of why we need to work so hard. So I am a bit surprised, Mr. Chair. This, again, is the words of a Liberal Prime Minister that are being removed by Liberal members on the Industry Committee, but perhaps I'll leave it to them to explain that rationale.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Guglielmin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to my colleague, Ms. Dancho, for introducing this very important motion today. As we all know, it's important to us because Canada is facing a critical economic challenge with billions of dollars leaving our country every single quarter. In June alone, a net outflow of $8.3 billion in securities left the Canadian economy. This brought total capital flight in the second quarter to astonishing $43.7 billion. I believe that number is $63.5 billion in the last 5 months. So investment that should be fueling Canadian jobs and innovation and growth is instead flowing south of the border. And foreign investors and Canadian companies are sending money abroad rather than keeping it right here in Canada. So again, I think it's very important that we include this language with the study, because we just need to highlight the severity. And I think we can all agree, as Ms. Dancho said, that this is an important issue facing our country. So.
Did you want to speak?
Appel au règlement, Monsieur le Président.
Point of order. Yes, Mr. Sainte-Marie? It is 5:30. We have the Competition Bureau waiting, and I was hoping that all of the motions would have been adopted within the first hour. We had a lot of time, so I would ask you to suspend this part of the meeting till Monday, and that we welcome our guests. Thank you. Sorry, that's unfortunately not a point of order. I understand what you're trying to do, so just give me a moment, please.
Okay, colleagues, I understand that there is agreement from the parties to move forward with adopting the language of Madame Dancho's motion as amended. So the first thing that we have to do, and I'm just trying to move quickly here, so I'm just looking for unanimous consent that we are good to adopt Mr. Bardisi's amendment to Madame Dancho's motion, which removes the language that he referenced. We're good? Well, we have to do one step at a time.
Yes.
Okay, I'm seeing no dissent, so the amendment carries. We now, seeing no speakers to the motion as amended, we need to vote on this. I'm looking for unanimous consent to speed things up. I have it. Motion is adopted. Colleagues, I'm going to now suspend to allow us to prepare for the appearance of our colleagues from the Competition Bureau. And at the end of that meeting, I'm going to take an extra couple of minutes to just very quickly come back to this and talk about how we move forward with our next week of meetings, as this took a little bit longer than I had anticipated. We're suspended for a few moments. Okay, Mr. Vies, who's joined us, Mr. Guglemy, Mr. Falk, Mr. Saint-Marie, on va commencer. We're going to get going. Colleagues, thank you. We're going to enter into the second half. As per our discussion at the subcommittee, there was a desire for us to hear from our colleagues at the Competition Bureau. And I'm just looking for my list with titles. Just want to make sure I get all the titles and names right, which I don't see. Are they? Okay, well, nonetheless, I can read from here, so we're going to be okay. We're going to provide 5 minutes, but if you need a little bit more time, certainly happy to do that. I apologize, I don't have the name of the specific positions other than the commissioner themselves, and if I mispronounce the names, I apologize, but I do see we've got with us from the Competition Bureau, Jean Pratt, Matthew Boswell, and Anthony DeRoche. Mr. Boswell, I presume you will be providing commentary, although, of course, feel free to split the time as you see fit with your colleagues. We'll start at 5 minutes. Hopefully you don't need too much more. And then what will happen, colleagues, is we'll enter into a line of questioning. And the way that that will go is it will begin with 6 minutes for a member of the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, and the Bloc, and then that will reduce, and we'll see how much time we have afterwards. So with that, Mr. Boswell, I am going to pass the floor over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to appear before you today. It's good to be back before this particular committee, which we've been in front of a fair bit, albeit with many new faces this evening. As the chair said, I am Matthew Boswell, and I am the Commissioner of Competition. I am joined today by my colleague Jean Pratt, who's the Senior Deputy Commissioner of the Mergers and Monopolistic Practices Branch, and Anthony DeRoche, the Deputy Commissioner of the Competition Promotion Branch. I would like to take my time this evening just to provide a quick overview of the Competition Bureau's role and some of our recent work. The Bureau is an independent law enforcement agency that protects and promotes competition for the benefit of Canadian consumers and businesses. We administer and enforce Canada's Competition Act, a law of general application that applies to every sector of the economy, as well as 3 labeling statutes. Our enforcement of the Act involves investigating and addressing abuses of market power, anti-competitive mergers, price fixing, bid rigging, and deceptive marketing practices. We also advocate to all levels of government in Canada for pro-competitive government rules and regulations. Competition is vital in our economy. La concurrence est vitale pour nous.
Competition is vital in our economy. More competition means lower costs and greater opportunities for Canadians. It drives productivity, catalyzes business investment, and helps ease cost of living pressures. Over the past 3 years, Parliament passed 3 waves of amendments to the Competition Act. These generational changes have strengthened the legislative framework to protect and promote competition in Canada. Among others, they have strengthened the Bureau's investigative and enforcement powers, modernized merger review, and created new tools to address emerging forms of market abuse that harms consumers and the economy.
Using all available tools to prevent, identify, and address anti-competitive activity, with a focus on sectors of the economy that matter to Canadians. In the past year, this includes taking legal action against Rogers for allegedly misleading claims about unlimited data, taking legal action against DoorDash for allegedly advertising misleading prices, taking legal action against Canada's Wonderland for allegedly advertising misleading prices online, taking legal action against Google for allegedly abusing its dominance in online advertising technology services in Canada, pursuing investigations into the use of property controls in the Canadian grocery industry, including monitoring Loblaw's recent commitment towards eliminating property controls in Canada. In June 2025, the Bureau published a market study report on airline competition in Canada, and we outlined how changes to policies such as foreign investment restrictions and airline merger oversight could deliver more competition, innovation, and choice to Canadians. And just 2 weeks ago, we launched a new market study of competition in the lending sector for small and medium-sized enterprises in Canada. We have also continued to engage in public consultations and release new guidance and updated enforcement guidelines to help businesses comply with the Competition Act following the recent amendments to the law. The Competition Act is a foundational tool to protect and promote greater competition in Canada, but it is not the only tool. Pour tirer parti des progrès
To build on the progress made in modernizing the Competition Act, all levels of government in Canada need to examine what more can be done to address the regulations and policies that often unintentionally hold back competition in Canada. Findings we published after an in-depth study show that Canada's competitive intensity has decreased over the last 2 decades. It will take a whole-of-government approach to turn the tide, with the federal government working alongside municipal, provincial, and territorial governments.
Chair, I'd like to take this opportunity to note that we are at a critical moment for Canada's economy. We are facing global uncertainty, rising protectionism, technological disruption, and growing affordability concerns. Competition is not a secondary issue in this context, but a foundational one. When firms and businesses face real competition, they are forced to innovate, invest, and improve. Now, just before fielding your questions, I would note, as I always do, that the law requires the Bureau to conduct its investigations in private and keep confidential information we have. This obligation may prevent us from discussing certain facets of our investigations or even the existence of certain investigations. And we ask that you understand the limits that are on us. Thank you very much, and we look forward to your questions.
Very much appreciate that. Okay, colleagues, first line of questioning goes to the Conservatives, and Madame Dancho, the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the Commissioner and staff for being with us, or the seniors from the Commissioner's office, pardon me, for all being here. And on behalf of the people I represent in Kildonan and St. Paul, thank you for the hard work that you're doing on behalf of Canadians. It's a very important work. And so, Commissioner, I'd like to follow up on an area of discussion that you had with the Conservatives, it was almost a year ago now, concerning the issue of Interact. And as you know, most Canadians use Interact every day. It's quite ubiquitous in Canada. But as we know, Interact is not a neutral public utility. It is a private company dominated by Canada's largest banks, which profit from the system and help set its rules. And from what I understand until recently, that meant that the banks who own Interact paid much lower fees for e-transfers, while smaller companies like credit unions, smaller banks, fintechs paid far more for the same services. And of course, you can understand that that would tilt the playing field in favor of the big banks. And so the Conservatives raised the alarm with a number of these issues. In October 2024, my colleagues Michelle Rumpel-Garner and Adam Chambers wrote to you outlining our concerns that Interact's tiered fee structure and governance created an unfair advantage for the big banks while keeping fees for consumers artificially high. And at the last meeting, you confirmed that your Bureau had launched a preliminary investigation into these concerns. And then on July 10th, your Bureau announced that Interact will end those volumes-based discounts and move to flat fee pricing, which is I think could be seen as a big win. And I appreciate the hard work from Conservatives and your responding work to that, and now Interact's move. However, I do have a few questions to see where the fairness is and perhaps what this past conduct for Interact means. Now, in your response letter to Mr. Chambers and Madam Rempel-Garner, you explained that, and I'm just going to quote your letter, Interact announced on June 4, 2025, that it's moving to a flat fee pricing model starting November 1st, 2025. I'm encouraged by this move, you said, because I believe it will help level the playing field for financial institutions of all sizes and create a more competitive sector. So, Commissioner, would it be fair to say then that Interact and the banks that govern it were engaging in uncompetitive practices prior to this fee change?
Well, I don't think that I can say definitively or conclude definitively that that was the case. We were investigating their conduct, and as said in the letter to your colleagues, we appreciated them flagging the issue. We had a very good discussion about the issue here at committee, and we then we were already investigating before the committee hearing, and we continued, and then when they announced that they were going to change the practice in question, the sort of volume-based tiered pricing of wholesale Interac was the main concern that we were looking at. And when they indicated that they were going to change to a flat fee system that didn't have the disparity of what appeared like disparity of fairness for smaller institutions to be able to compete, we took the decision that it wasn't, that we weren't going to continue the investigation, that we would monitor their commitment to change to a flat fee. And, I understand some people may not understand, how law enforcement sometimes has to prioritize investigations, but that's what we have to do at the Bureau all the time, is make decisions about which investigations to prioritize. And in this situation, we felt that what they were moving towards addressed the key part of the problem, and we were going to monitor their implementation of that. So that's where we're at. I can't say, though, that we definitively concluded that, there was anti-competitive conduct.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that response. But just so I understand what you're saying, though, had Interact not moved to a different payment structure, a fee structure, are you saying that a further police investigation or law enforcement investigation, would have been conducted?
It's always tricky to speculate in these things. What I can say very definitively is we had an investigation going, and when there was a material change in circumstances, we assessed the investigation and decided that we would, for lack of a better term, put it on hold while we monitored the commitment.
Okay, and if I may just clarify, I believe under the Competition Act, it prohibits what's called an abuse of dominance, which, as you know, a company that already controls most of a market uses its power to tilt the rules against a smaller competitor. That seems to apply in this situation with Interact. Do you see that kind of conduct as potentially falling under the abuse of dominance, depending on the evidence?
It certainly was the nature of the investigation and the nature of the discussion about Interact's market power in Canada and conduct that we were looking at, which was the volume-based tier pricing that effectively benefited the big banks, which were the owners, the primary owners of Interact itself.
And thank you, Commissioner. And had your investigation continued and had it been found that there was an abuse of dominance, just so I'm clear on the potential penalties, they can range from up to $25 million to $35 million, and could apply to cover the full period, in fact, of that conduct, based on your comments at the last committee meeting you were here in November.
Yes, there are various, including the ones that you mentioned. There are various remedies that we could seek in an abuse of dominance hearing, but only after a trial, if there wasn't a resolution in advance of trial. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Madame Dancho. Mr. Baines, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for joining us today, and the Deputy Commissioner and your team, Mr. Durocher. Today, I'm going to stay on the same theme as my colleague across the way on the banking issue. I met with Canadian bankers today, and there right now, a big issue is around fraud and fraud prevention. And in 2024, Canadians were scammed out of $638 million in total. And these funds then, we know, get injected into criminal enterprises. And they're being approached through different platforms, digital, over the phone, WhatsApp, different applications. So can you maybe inform the committee if you've done any work on this, or have you looked at this and worked with the banks in any way on this to help people, be not scammed ultimately?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so as I said in the opening comments, we pursue deceptive marketing and we pursue mass marketing fraud under the Competition Act. And we've had criminal prosecutions into mass marketing fraud in the last several years that have resulted in significant penalties, including jail for an individual named Terry Croteau. We are also one of the 3 key partners of the Canada Anti-Fraud Centre, located in North Bay, that does incredible work on a very small budget. If anyone's looking to provide them with additional funds, that would be great. But it's the RCMP, the Competition Bureau, and the Ontario Provincial Police run the Canada Anti-Fraud Centre, which is primarily a call center and taking in, gathering data on fraudulent scams, the scam of the moment, and trying to disrupt those scams. And the Bureau also has a unit that is dedicated to disrupting mass marketing fraud by, well, I won't get into all the details how we do it, but by using tools at our disposal and contacts that we have to try and disrupt frauds that are getting underway and scams that are getting underway. I mean, what's interesting is, unfortunately, probably the number that you heard is not even close to the actual number of the amount of the dollars that Canadians are defrauded every year. And of course, with the digital economy, it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem to police that type of behavior, because it can originate anywhere and end up in a living room in Kelowna or Saskatoon and be perpetrated by people on the other side of the world who are very difficult to track down. So this is becoming a bigger and bigger problem that we have to pay more and more attention to. So I hope that provides you a kind of an overview of the work we do in this area, but we do investigate and refer criminal cases to the Public Prosecution Service of Canada for this type of mass marketing fraud.
Thank you for that. Can you maybe share, I know that you talked a lot about previous investigations and the results of those. If you can share maybe active investigations that are going on, maybe that you're pursuing right now, and other challenges you're facing right now.
Yeah, so I can't share active investigations for a variety of reasons, including letting people know that who are being investigated that we're investigating them, which is never a good idea in law enforcement. But I can tell you that we do have active investigations. We have a dedicated team that looks at this particular aspect of deceptive marketing. I'm happy to share, I don't have it with me, I'm happy to share after the meeting some examples of recent convictions, recent action that we've taken in the mass marketing fraud, deceptive marketing, criminal cases. Happy to share that with the committee.
And my next question is about Bill C-59. In what ways has Bill C-59 equipped you with necessary tools to carry out your work more effectively?
That's a very big question. There are a lot of things in C-59. Let me turn to my notes. So, and this answer could take most of the rest of our time.
Well, maybe if I go to, in what ways has the change allowed expanded private access to competition tribunal for Canadians been effective? Maybe that area.
Mr. Boswell, I'll assist you by telling you have about 90 seconds to.
90?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. So we are the public enforcer, and that's a very important role, and we're it for Canada. But C-59 and earlier amendments really expanded private enforcement in Canada, allowing for private lawsuits to be brought under deceptive marketing, under civil agreements between competitors. It also eases the test for private parties to get in front of the court. So that is very positive because we have finite resources. We have a mountain of complaints every year. There's way more cases than we can take. So if there's more ability for private enforcement, and we're watching how it develops now because it's just come online in June, that is a great development for competition law enforcement in Canada.
Thanks very much, Mr. Baines. Monsieur Saint-Marie, la parole à vous pour 6 minutes.
Mr. Saint-Marie, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So greetings to Mr. Broswell, Ms. Pratt, and Mr. Durocher. Thank you for your work and for your presence here today. You answered very quickly to be here today. My first question deals with the issues that Mr. Baines raised. That is to say, the bill that was passed in the last Parliament, what that changes tangibly for you. So it was C-56 to begin with, and I think it was a budget implementation bill, that C-59, that took up its provisions. And we had been asking for some of these changes in the Bloc for decades. So how does that tangibly change your work? First of all, one change that Mr. Boswell, you referred to in your speech, allows you to force a person to testify, or you can demand documents. So is that something that's useful for your office today? Thank you. Thank you for the question. I'll answer in English because I didn't hear the whole question.
As I just said to Honourable Member Baines, was really quite a sea change in competition law in Canada. There were many significant developments that we at the Bureau had been calling for a long time, and other people had been calling for it a long time. Obviously, there were some changes that really captured the public's attention, but probably I would say the most significant area in C-59, sir, would be the changes to the merger regime in Canada. It really took us from what my predecessor and other former commissioners have said was the weakest merger law among all our peer countries in the world, to being actually quite a strong merger law now that can really protect competition in Canada. And that is, merger review is the first line of defense to preventing even more concentration in a very concentrated economy. I hope that answers.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. That is a component of C-59, and that was from the past Parliament. So if there was this gain in efficiency, if that is the result, we have to authorize the transaction. So I understand that clause being withdrawn plays a very important role for your office in the work that you can do. But I'd like to come back to another part of it, which was in the first question. You can now force witnesses to collaborate, or you can go after documents in your investigation. So is that something you've used? Has it been useful to you?
And I apologize. That's okay. This was a very important change as well, which was to give us the power when we're conducting what we call market studies, where we look at competition in a whole sector of the economy, and we see what the competition issues are in that sector. Before these changes, which were in C-56, actually, these changes in 2023, we couldn't compel companies we were looking at in the market study to provide us with records. And we had trouble in the past getting fulsome cooperation from companies. Now, since C-56, we have those powers to compel records during market studies, and we've already used them in our study into competition in passenger air travel in Canada. We've used those Section 11 powers, and they've allowed us to get at more information and data about competition in the sector. So that is another of the many important changes to the law in the last 3 years.
Merci beaucoup. Ravi d'entendre votre témoignage.
Thank you. I'm delighted to hear your testimony in this regard. Another thing that changed in C-56 was anti-competitive provisions. Now there are more. There are practices that can be perceived as being indirect. For example, coming to an agreement with someone who's not a competitor, but with a goal to reducing competition. So that's another tool that you use that makes a difference. Is that correct?
I'm trying to remember what year that was. I know was it C-56? C-56 as well, which allowed us, and this is a very important point for grocery competition, was it effectively created a provision where the Bureau could pursue agreements not between competitors. And I think Minister Champagne even talked about it in the House of Commons when he came to speak to it, or perhaps it was the Senate. But these are what we refer to as property controls, where a grocery company will put in place a restrictive covenant on title so that no other grocery business or that type of business can locate in on a property. And they can put that in place and then they can leave. So there's no ability for a grocery store to open in some areas. So that amendment to Section 90.1 of the Act was very important and something that the Bureau has relied upon in a investigation that we initiated in June 2024 into the use of property controls in the greater Halifax area. And we're investigating, excuse me, effectively George Weston and Empire, the owner of Sobeys in the Halifax area. And also, we were able to get a property control removed in Crow's Nest Pass, Blairmore, the municipality of Blairmore, that had been put in place as well by Sobeys that prevented effectively anybody from coming into the only realistic spot where you could open a second grocery store in that mountain town. So those are important developments in terms of helping advance competition in the grocery sector, and it's based on that amendment.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur Saint-Marie. Thank you, Mr. Boswell. Okay, colleagues, so we are going to go into our second round here. I've got 5 minutes to the Conservatives. Ms. O'Rourke will be second for the Liberals, and then back to Monsieur Saint-Marie for 5 minutes. I'm not sure what our timing is going to track for a third round, but I'll keep an eye on it here. Mr. Guglielmin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I'll be splitting my time with Brad Viss. I'll be giving him 2 minutes, right at the 3-minute mark. Thank you, Commissioner, for attending today and for all the great work you do. I would like to ask you about airfare in this country, because like many Canadians, when I'm traveling abroad in places like Europe or the United States, within those countries, one of the things that's very striking is how expensive it can be to fly within Canada. And according to the International Air Transport Association, Canada ranks 101st out of 116 countries for the cost of air travel. We know from the study issued by the Competition Bureau on airline competition back in June of this year that government subsidies have not reduced the cost of airfare for Canadians. So just curious what you would say is the cause of the increased price of airfare in Canada.
Well, I have lots to say on that, but what I'm going to do is ask Mr. Durocher, who is the lead of our market study into passenger airline competition in Canada, to provide his evidence-based thoughts there.
So when we look at airline competition, as we did for close to a year, it's a concentrated market in Canada. Air Canada and WestJet combined control anywhere between 56% and 78% of passenger share in most major airports in Canada. There have been inroads of competition if we look at Porter and Flair, but if we look at the history, competition can be fragile. We also know competition matters for airfares. So we did some data work that showed that when you have one more competitor flying on a given route in Canada, prices go down 9%. So competition is very important, especially given concerns about affordability. We provided 10 recommendations for tangible steps that governments can do to increase competition in the market. 3 broad categories: prioritizing competition in federal aviation policy, looking at lowering barriers to foreign investment in the Canadian industry so that we can tap foreign investment and experience to enable it to thrive. And thirdly is looking at the northern Canada and remote regions and how we can take steps to prioritize contestability in these remote markets.
So there's a recent Fraser Institute report that states government and airport imposed taxes and fees comprise 25 to 35% of airfare costs in Canada. These charges have been repeatedly cited as major contributors to rising ticket prices and limited competition in the sectors you just mentioned. Given the government's role in setting these taxes, how much impact do you believe they have on airfare costs?
So thank you for the question. That's an issue that we discuss at length in our report. In fact, it does constitute a sizable portion of ticket pricing in Canada, in the order of 30%. And from a competition perspective, what's important is that that can have a disproportionate impact on lower cost airlines, who are very important to provide kind of the disruptive competition that helps on airfares in Canada.
I'm ceding the rest of my time to Kivis.
On January 25th, 2023, Ms. Pratt was before this committee and outlined that the commissioner filed an application with the Competition Tribunal under Section 92 of the Competition Act seeking to block the then proposed merger between Rogers and Shaw. Ms. Pratt mentioned that it would negatively impact millions of British Columbians and Albertans. Today, we're seeing the negative impact of that merger. In fact, the United Steelworkers Local 1944 in my riding are on strike because they don't have wage parity with the long-term Rogers employees. They previously worked for Shaw. When Rogers came before this committee, they made big promises stating they would invest $6 billion in rural infrastructure. They said there would be more jobs and prices would be lower. It's a fact that prices went up and we haven't seen those investments. What can we do a better job of in this country to ensure that workers are protected in future mergers moving forward?
Well, I will say our Rogers and Shaw, we fought that merger. We brought a case to the tribunal. We did think that it was going to be harmful to competition. And that case we brought under our old framework, which was before C-56, before C-59. We couldn't actually consider labor that directly under our old test because labor job losses were actually an efficiency that might be a plus factor for the tribunal to look at the merger as a good thing.
So the work we did on efficiencies can make a big difference now?
I think, well, I can only say I did not look at these issues under the old framework.
Yeah.
I can say under C-56 and C-59, where labor was specifically added as a factor to be considered in the merger provisions of the Act, that we would be able to consider it in an investigation if that merger were before to us today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fiss. Ms. O'Rourke, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Carr. Bienvenue. Il me fait vraiment plaisir de...
Welcome. I'm very pleased to be discussing with the very impressive work that you're doing on behalf of Canadians, and I thank you for it.
Talk about grocery prices and competition in that really important sector. So we know that many factors are driving prices at the grocery store, right? Could be supply chain issues, could be climate change, could be scarcity, but competition is among them. So in 2023, the Competition Bureau released a study of the Canadian retail grocery market, and you had 4 recommendations that would improve competition in the grocery industry, including the growth of independent grocers and the entry of international grocers into the Canadian market. So I'm wondering, what is the progress on those 4 recommendations, and how are you working with policymakers and industry to implement those recommendations to improve competition in the grocery space for Canadians?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, competition is fundamental to when we look at grocery prices. We've seen good progress on some of our recommendations. Just to name a few, when we look at property control, so one of our recommendations was that provinces look to eliminate property controls. These can be very important barriers to entry or expansion for new grocery stores expanding. So there have been steps taken to amend the Competition Act to give us better tools to address this. There have been investigations launched as well, but also provinces have taken action. So a recent move by the province of Manitoba to eliminate property controls shows real leadership on this file. We know that the government has actively worked to try and entice or promote the entry of a foreign grocery player in Canada, which we know internationally, when we've seen foreign entrants come in, it can really shake up a grocery market and play an important role. We've also seen one of our recommendations was around pricing and to facilitate pricing comparison for Canadian consumers. We've seen the province of Quebec take important steps with a bill to facilitate pricing comparisons for consumers as well. So we've seen important progress, and I think work continues for the Bureau in the grocery industry. It's a priority sector for us. It's one that's deeply important for Canadians, and we're on the beat.
In the provinces so that they can join us really in advocating for more competition in the grocery sector and lower prices for Canadians. So I'm thrilled to hear that and fascinated by the investigation into the property controls. Do you have any additional investigations? I suppose you can't say. In terms of those, I suspect where I come from that there were a few of those. So I just want to shift then to ask, when you're taking into account the business growth and market competition, how do you consider improving competition in more entrenched industries and sectors to make sure that Canadians are getting the best deal? So how are you implementing improvements for Canadian competition in other sectors? You've mentioned some for groceries, so regale us with your innovative and impactful solutions.
Well, first, just to go back to your previous subject, and you asked about ongoing investigations in terms of groceries. We are continuing our investigation into bread price fixing, where Canada Bread pled guilty in the summer of 2023 to a $50 million fine for price fixing with Weston Bread. So that investigation continues, and there are multiple companies under investigation, and that's public. That's why I can talk about it. And of course, our investigation in that area led to a class action that was just settled by Loblaws, where they agreed to pay $500 million to Canadian consumers. So that's an aspect of the grocery market that we continue to investigate. We've obtained some results in terms of guilty plea by Canada Bread and Loblaws admitting its involvement through our immunity program. In terms of other sectors, perhaps I'll just quickly say that we have two roles of the Bureau: to protect competition, which is mainly our enforcement role, and to promote competition in Canada. And the Act contemplates us making submissions to federal boards and tribunals, and of course now the Act specifically contemplates us engaging in market studies to determine what the competition issues are in a given sector of the economy. You've already heard, we've done that in passenger air travel. We've done that in the grocery industry before we had powers. And on September 4th, we launched publicly a consultation into our new market study, which is into the financing sector for small and medium-sized enterprises in Canada, with a focus, at least right now in our consultation paper, with a focus on term loans. And we engaged in that study because we saw some.
Mr. Boswell, I'm sorry to cut you off. If you could just
sorry.
wrap up, because we are tracking to be behind. So I know
Sorry.
you're trying to be.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I know you're trying to give fulsome answers, but I need to make sure to get back to other members as well.
So that's our new area that we're looking into, and just because we're running out, I mean, we are doing this all the time at different levels of government all across the country on different subjects, as much as our resources allow, as much as Mr. Durocher's team has capacity to take on advocacy projects to advocate for more competition in the Canadian economy, because we desperately need it.
I have no further questions, just a lot of thanks. Please continue your investigations into the grocery sector to make sure that we're providing the best value and the most competition for Canadians.
Monsieur Saint-Marie.
Thank you. My next question, and take all the time that you need to answer it, I would like to know or understand the challenges that your office has with the web giants. And I'll give you two examples. In April of this year, La Presse said that the Competition Bureau is, it said that you replied to Google concerning its advertising policies in Canada, accusing the business of trying to mask its anti-competitive practices. And another example this summer with Amazon, still from La Presse, it was published July the 8th. The Competition Bureau obtains a legal order, and it concerns the fees. So generally speaking, how can we face the web giants? How can your office face them?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman.
Issue that as the honourable member points out, the Bureau is very active in, and as the honourable member points out, we have 3 actual active public investigations into large digital platforms. Well, we have initiated, as I said in my opening statement, a lawsuit against Google at the tribunal. Our pleadings and all the information we've put forward to the tribunal at this point in time are available from the Competition Tribunal. It's best if I don't get into further details, but the case is before the tribunal, and we're moving forward with that. And we have 2 separate investigations into Amazon's conduct in Canada. One is in relation to its pricing policies on their sales platform, and the other is with respect to fake reviews on the Amazon platform. And I can't say much more about those other than they are proceeding. We are engaging with Amazon in certain court matters as we move forward. But these are these align with the Bureau's priority to focus our efforts on areas that matter to Canadians and to become a leading competition agency among global competition agencies in enforcing the law in the digital economy, which really is the modern economy. And these platforms, you know, we all interact with them all the time, and it's very important that we're vigilant on the conduct going on these platforms.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur Saint-Marie. Okay, colleagues, we've got 5 minutes to the Conservatives and 5 minutes to the Liberals, which will conclude the amount of time we have for questioning today. Mr. Falk, floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses here, Mr. Boswell, Ms. Pratt, and Mr. Rocha. Thank you very much for your attendance here and the information that you're providing. I, too, was going to focus a little bit on the grocery sector. You know, when I look around in some of the communities in my riding in southeast Manitoba, I've noticed that a lot of the small grocers really struggle, and some of them close because they just can't seem to make it. And I also noticed that the people that you have to use a lot of the smaller grocery stores and outlets are people that have mobility challenges and can't drive to the bigger box centers. And the pricing is always more expensive in these smaller outlets. And I'm wondering if it's not similar to the issue that Ms. Dancho asked about with the financial institutions, whether there's an interact funnel that needs to be addressed. My understanding is that a lot of the small grocers have to buy from a limited amount of distribution centers, and these are often owned by the larger players in the industry. Can you comment a little bit on that and what can be done? Because food cost is something that everybody talks about.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a very serious concern to all Canadians now, and has been for some time. You know, we saw in 2023 that the grocery prices were rising faster than they had in 40 years. And in our grocery market study report, where we did a deep dive on what was really going on and what the competition issues were in the grocery sector, one of the, or a couple of the findings that we made and what we heard from people we spoke to was that independents, that is smaller grocery stores, were finding it harder to compete. They relied on wholesale, and the wholesale was owned by the larger incumbents, and that really hurt their ability to compete with the larger incumbents. We also saw that there were new models that were trying to emerge, which was, you know, no retail site, just strictly delivery. But the problem, once again, was that they would have to rely on the wholesales that are controlled by the larger players. So that definitely presents a problem in Canada. And then in terms of what you sort of communicated about only smaller stores being in certain areas, and that is also partially tied to the property controls issue, where it goes even further, where you have what are called food deserts.
I have to cede my time here.
Sorry.
But thank you. I know that could be a very comprehensive answer yet.
Sorry.
but I appreciate what you provided. So
Okay. Who are you ceding your time to?
Ms. Borelli.
Okay, Ms. Borelli, the floor is yours for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Boswell, the former Minister Navdeep Bains wrote a letter to you back in 2019 as you assumed your new role as the Commissioner of Competition. Within that letter, Mr. Bains emphasized creating a competitive environment where small and medium-sized enterprises can thrive. Recent numbers have shown a 3.8% jump of insolvencies from 2024 to 2025. My riding alone has had a rate that's one of the highest in the country. Mr. Boswell, what concrete steps has the Bureau taken to ensure small and medium-sized businesses aren't squeezed out by the bigger companies?
Yes, thank you. It's a very important question, and that centers on our abuse of dominance investigations, where big companies are using anti-competitive conduct to try and squeeze out, kill other competitors. And we have obviously active investigations in that area, but it's also an issue where we get a lot of complaints and we only have a limited amount of resources to advance those investigations. So we do what we can, and we, as I alluded to earlier or spoke about, you know, we have to prioritize. But that is the role we can play, is to be vigilant for anti-competitive conduct and to take action to the extent we can with the resources we have to stop that anti-competitive conduct. But, you know, I guess just the caveat is that we are it for the entire country, and we have about 450 people. And so, you know, we do as much as we can, but we can't be everywhere all the time. That's probably not a good answer, but it's an honest answer.
Thank you very much, Ms. Borelli. Mr. Bardizzi, you'll conclude with 5 minutes.
Thanks to you and those hardworking 450 folks who do that work. I just want to ask a couple of questions about the new study you've initiated on financing for small and medium-sized enterprises. So there's not a lot of kind of current data on this phenomenon. Industry Canada does a study every 2 years that you refer to in your framing paper, which notes SMEs appear to have received less new credit while larger businesses received more. For example, in the second half of 2023, the number of new loans to small businesses dropped by 19%, whereas larger businesses have seen a rise of 14.4%. I understand this, as you mentioned, the study is focusing on term loans. What kind of sources of data are available to the Competition Bureau that's going to help inform this study?
Well, I can speak to the right now, the motivation to launch the study itself were based on observations that you mentioned and studies as well that suggested that it's in the public interest to examine what's happening. And it goes to the core of small and medium-sized enterprise in Canada. They are the backbone of the Canadian economy, critical for productivity, innovation, and also to bring competitive intensity in all sorts of markets across Canada. So some of the data that we referenced that you mentioned, another is just the disparity of interest rates paid between small and large businesses. It appears, and this is based on a study cited by the OECD, that in Canada the disparity is bigger than other countries. And so that's prompting us to ask, why is that? And we know that the financial sector is concentrated. So right now we're at the stage of our study where we're considering views of stakeholders for 30 days as to the scope of the study. And that is going to inform the breadth of the issues that we're going to be examining and where we're going to get our data from and stakeholders as well. So we look forward to hearing from all interested stakeholders, but from our perspective, this is a very important study given the importance of small and medium-sized business to the Canadian economy.
Something that I've heard in my writing, and I think this is a common experience of others and perhaps even other members in their own past private lives, is that financing decisions that used to be taken more locally at the branch level or the regional level are now being more centralized in the head offices or in other centralized operations of the major financial institutions. Do you have any? Is there any qualitative evidence, or is there any examination of that issue as part of your work?
That's an interesting observation, and I think is exactly the type of information that we want to hear from Canadians right now to get at the heart of the issue as to how is competition working, and looking at, as an example, barriers to entry for new, smaller lenders such as fintechs to grab a foothold in the market and bring innovative services to offer a greater diversity of products and more financing options for SMEs. We're also looking at switching costs, right? The ability for a small and medium-sized enterprise, if it sees a better deal elsewhere, to enable it to expand or invest or invest in new machinery, looking at its ability to play the competition off each other and switch suppliers.
Study to look at the special financing needs, or if there's any further disparities within the sector for minority-owned or women-owned SMEs that might face even further barriers, where these statistics might even be worse than what you've already cited?
Yeah, I think that is an area that we will be examining, and I think we hope to hear from Canadians on that very issue. We've certainly taken note of some data in that regards about the lack of financing for certain groups, and also goes to the importance of competition to provide options and opportunities for all Canadians.
Okay, thank you.
Well, to adopt, yeah. Sorry, thank you, Mr. Murthy. There's a lot of things going on when you're up here. Witnesses, thank you very much for appearing. We are going to conclude, so we're going to continue briefly with a little bit of committee business that we have to attend to. So please feel free to just pack up quietly and be on your way. But we very much do appreciate you taking time to present here. Merci beaucoup pour votre.
Thank you very much for your testimony today. It was most interesting. Thank you, and good evening.
I'm just going to move us very quickly back into committee business. And I see that Monsieur Saint-Marie, vous avez la parole.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
You have the floor. The committee has received two motions that I would like to have passed with different. I think that I've understood that for the motion that is intended to study artificial intelligence, that there would be more discussions that we'd like to have on that. So I'll move it at the next meeting. But for this meeting, I'd like, if we could, to adopt a motion that would be to invite the Honorable Mélanie Joly, the Minister of Industry, to appear before the committee for at least 1 hour on the topic of her mandate, including the subject. So you've received it, I believe, through the committee, that pursuant to Standing Order 1083, the committee invite the Minister of Industry, Science and Economic Development and the Minister responsible for Canada Economic Development for Quebec regions, Mélanie Joly, to appear before the committee for at least 1 hour on the topic of her mandate, including the subjects of the studies that the committee has initiated. So that is my motion. If we could pass it quickly, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Saint-Marie. Ms. Dancho.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Mr. Saint-Marie for bringing this forward. We, of course, certainly support the Minister coming to committee and talking about her mandate. That's quite a broad topic, and I think there's lots we can talk about. And I appreciate that you put for at least 1 hour, so hopefully Minister Joly can give us 2. But I would say that our support for this is premised on the fact that we've also invited her for other things, and I just want to make clear that our support for your motion does not mean we no longer need her for other things, that this committee may agree to bring her for other studies. So I just wanted to make that clear. But yes, we support it.
Okay, and yes, Madame Dancho, certainly you or other members are free to invite any ministers or any other witnesses at a future date. But colleagues, just to be very clear, what we are speaking about right now is this specific motion that was just presented by Mr. Saint-Marie. My understanding is, and I hope that understanding is still correct, that we have agreement amongst the parties to adopt this motion. So rather than call a vote, I'm just looking for unanimous consent for the motion presented in front of us. I see agreement. The motion is adopted. Colleagues, thank you for a productive and interesting first meeting. Yeah, so right before I adjourn, very important for the clerk and the analysts that as soon as we are able, we get them the names and the contact information, highlighting, bolding, italicizing contact information, although the italicization might not add anything, that you get that to them so that they can prepare. So if you have witnesses for the study that we adopted through the motion that was presented from Madame Dancho earlier, please ensure that you're getting those as quickly as possible to the clerk and to the analysts, and then I'll make a decision about how we go forward. The current plan, colleagues, is for us to reconvene on Monday. And you will have to wait until there's an official notice sent out, but the plan is for us to convene, at which point we will continue our discussion. We'll try to see if we can get some witnesses ready for Monday, but in the absence of that, we'll have to pivot. And just a reminder that Wednesday's meeting for 1 hour will include the CRTC commissioner who was unable to join us on Monday. Okay, Madame Dancho.
In the past, we've had that we are told how many witnesses we get, and everyone has a deadline. Did you want to talk about that offside? I just want to make sure.
I think that in terms of setting a deadline for witnesses, that's going to require a little bit of conversation, which, given our time on the clock right now, I'd rather push to next week if everyone's amenable to that. Wonderful. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.